Alrighty, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Academy of Aesthetic Musings. This is going to be a behind the ballot episode. I'm going to do it a little bit differently this time. Last time I sat down, I went through all the winners and I revealed exactly what the votes were per category. You can't really do that at the Oscars because then it's like, oh, I'm the worst winning Best Picture winner of all time. But since it's just like our opinion about someone else's work, it's a very different context. So it's kind of fun to see how the numbers actually shook up and what everybody's sentiments were. That said, I didn't want to do the whole on-camera process. I wanted to experiment a little bit. So this time I brought with me Corbett, the mini chairman, and Noah as well, who's sort of like a minion chairman becoming, I feel.
Wow, a minion. All right, I see it.
So how are you guys this evening?
I'm doing good. A little sleep deprived, but work's a bit less crazy lately. So, and had a reasonably relaxing weekend where I was able to chip away at some errands and stuff like that. So overall, having a good day, I think.
Nice.
Yeah, I'm doing pretty well. Kind of mad that Doom didn't win all of them, but hey, we're here now. So
Yeah. Yeah, so actually, let's just jump right into it. I think we'll work bottom up. We'll start with Best Narrative Comp, and, there might be something novel to say about each one, but if there isn't, we'll just kind of shimmy right along. So, with Narrative Composition, this was a pretty clean sweep. Everybody put it down as their first choice, except for one person was in the Dragon Quest V camp.
that must have been you.
Actually, it was not me.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, close call there. And that was because even though I really liked Dragon Quest V, I did feel like Star Control 2 deserved it just for the sheer variety and all the aliens they had. And also, it was like one of the few categories where I was putting Star Control 2 down for my first choice. And I knew it had a good chance of taking Best Pixel, and that always gives it a little bit of a bump, at least somewhere on the ballot. So, yep.
Interesting. I'm kind of surprised that Gabriel Knight got completely massacred. I mean, I'm the only person who gave it a higher spot on the ballot and whatnot. I mean, I don't know. I get that there's some problematic elements in there, but there's a lot of really cool stuff in there too. So I mean, I don't know if it. But at the end of the day, I mean, Star Control 2 is better, so I'm not really complaining all in all that much, And I mean, it's the one that it would have had Star Control 2 would have had a hard time winning Best Pixel if it didn't get this category and stuff like that. So it's probably for the best that I'm glad that it got the win. I mean, it's it. So yeah. I'm not really too upset about all things considered.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. But you weren't entirely alone. If we look at Best Male Character, we can see that right away. Gabriel got 2 first choice votes. It was you and another voter. And then I was in the Papa's camp here. And
Same.
Where were you? Oh, you were in the Papa's? Okay, so that's you and I that I'm seeing there. And then we had some people scattered on Max and random. Poor old Jake. Even though I think everybody agreed Jake had a good argument to win. But it was just it was a good argument to be there. He was very justifiably there in the end, but not I don't think anyone was like, yay, Jake needs to win.
Yeah, I know. There's a lot of things on here and whatnot. I mean, being nominated in and of itself is sort of recognition of a kind and whatnot. So, there's certain characters where I'm okay, they got their nomination, so, we're good to go there and stuff like that. Even if they aren't necessarily in line for winning, it's still cool that they got their nomination and stuff like that. And I don't know. Yeah, overall, I'm not upset about Papa's winning Best and whatnot. He wasn't my number one pick, but, he's a very solid character and probably one that, a lot of people, when they think of Dragon Quest, will think of him since he's very commanding presence in Dragon Quest and kind of a central motivating factor for a lot of the game. So pretty central to the emotional gravitas of that game and stuff.
Yeah, I was really torn between him and Random. I really liked both of them equally, but yeah, I just felt like Papa's definitely pulled a little bit more weight in the end, and that came up in the debates too, where it's like you said, he has such a presence in the game, and he's also able to mask some of the things in the game that you're doing that otherwise wouldn't make a lot of sense, like being a 6-year-old going out and killing a bunch of monsters is not really par for the course for 6-year-olds. But when you have a dad in the game who says go run around and play, that kind of recontextualizes things for you. That makes a lot of sense. And actually too, you're talking about Gabriel Knight not doing as well, but Gabriel Knight did pick up the silver in both narrative composition and for Best Male Character. Although maybe it's not quite as strong as it could have been, because in narrative comp, its only other competition is Illusion of Gaia, which I think that one got kind of destroyed just because the translation was so bad. That just really, really hurt it for me, and I imagine for others as well.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, Illusion of Gaia was still a good story, especially considering
Yeah.
it's a SNES game where, a lot of times, good stories are kind of hard to come by and stuff like that, But, yeah, I mean, when you get up against, like, heavy hitters and stuff like that, where,
Yeah.
like, some, like, Star Control 2 is, like, the favorite game of all time for, like, so many game developers and fans and stuff, it's just, like, yeah, it's not really going to hold a candle to these, big titans of industry and stuff.
Yeah. Agreed. But Gabriel, he's got a little more weight because he pulled ahead over Max, and I guess it was just Max, him, the two of them. But yeah, you got at least one other voter on your side. You got somebody.
Okay. Yep. Fair enough.
And then you definitely took best female character when Grace pulled ahead. That was a pretty close call. Let's see. Alice has a 1-1-2-2-2-4, and then Grace has 1-1-1-2-3-4.
So the score is tied.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, the only thing that breaks the example here is that you have more first choice votes from the beginning.
Yeah, I actually am curious as we're going along here. Do you have it memorized? Like, I remember for a little while there, we were considering switching to star voting. Do you know which? Could you mention which, if any, of these categories would have switched if it was star voting as opposed to the ranked choice method that we've got?
Yeah, you're right. I probably should have prefaced more with that. Sorry, this is like a more lazy episode, but it's been a ton of work, so I'm just giving myself a pass here. So, like, as a refresher, the way the voting works is everybody ranks all the nominees 1 to 5, and in order to win, you need to get 50% of the votes plus 1. And your first choice is the only vote that technically counts, at least to start with. And so we had 6 voters this time. That means a game needs 4 voters in order to win. So when we look at narrative composition, Star Control pulls 5 first choice votes, so it wins. It doesn't need any more support than that. But when we go over to like best male character, Gabriel and Papa's only secure, 1 or 2 first choice votes apiece, and then there's 2 other voters out there whose voice hasn't counted yet, and they haven't met that threshold. So what happens is, using instant runoff method, we drop other nominees from the ballot, and we redistribute those votes back out. And the way that we determine who to drop first is fewest number of first choice votes, so Jake drops first, and he's no longer eligible to win. And then it would be max or random, depending on which one has a higher point score. And the point score is just a matter of how it was ranked. You add up all the votes together, and that gives it kind of like a measure of how well it's doing. And then you can start dropping games from there. And if there's ever a tie, like you have 3 for one game and then another 3 for another game, at that point you compare points once again. And also, this is full spoilers, if if you hadn't already noticed. So we're expecting you to have already seen the winners announcement that went live on a Saturday, probably last Saturday or the Saturday before it, something like that. So you should watch that first to be all surprised and in awe over the choices. And then here is like us going to be sitting down and breaking things up.
Oh man, I feel sorry for like the poor sap who comes across this video first, has all the things spoiled by our just lazy ramblings, and then when they have this really nice put together awards show that they would miss out on. But
watch me, I haven't seen the video yet, so.
Yeah, I know. I just finished editing it like last week or something like that. So it's on. If you want to watch it, you can go to the channel, but it'll be out in a couple days anyways.
What's all got spoiled to me now, so.
You were there.
Oh yeah, you're right. Forgot about that.
But yes, Corvette had mentioned star voting, which is a system that we're still debating internally. We debated it for this season as well. It's actually it's interesting how star voting comes up with almost exactly the same results. I think, what did I say before? There's only 2 categories that flip.
I don't remember.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's just 2 of them that flip, and then everything else remains the same. So we'll go ahead and go through those as we go along. Actually, speaking of, one of them has to do with Best Original Score. So this goes to Secret of Mana, but under Star Voting, Star Control 2 would actually win. And the star voting, essentially, what that does is it takes the points first, and it determines the top 2 games, or the top 2 contenders that have the best point score. In this case, the lower the score, the better. And then it just drops everything else from the ballot. And whoever hasn't had a chance to weigh in on those top 2, they get to put 1 vote for either of the 2, and whichever one they rank, higher, that's the one where their vote's going to go. It's kind of like a simpler way to go about it, but it is a little bit more. It does kind of it averages out. Like, you have a better chance of winning if you have just a better score, like Star Control here, as where like everyone agrees it's pretty good. Whereas like Secret of Mana, it's still winning, but you could see there's 2 people who ranked it 5th choice. So those people are not particularly happy with the win. And it just so happens in this case that those same 2 people are the ones who put Gabriel Knight in for their first choice. But Gabriel Knight's point score is not as good as Star Control's, which they ranked, I think, 2nd or maybe 3rd. Well, one of these is you, Corbett, so maybe you can illuminate me there.
Oh, yeah, sure. So I've got Gabriel Knight as my number 1, and then Star Control 2 is my number 2, and then it's Illusion of Gaia, then Contra, then Secret of Mana. So yeah, I was one of the haters for Secret of Mana in a way, but like, it's not like I hate the soundtrack, it just wasn't my personal cup of tea. And I don't know, I mean, I am personally a proponent of the ranked choice thing over star voting, and so for me, I am glad to see that Secret of Mana can still win when there's haters like me on board. I feel like I feel kind of bad if I single-handedly kill things just because I'm not on board. I feel like it should be, if me and like a number of other people are all on board, then maybe it doesn't deserve to win. But if it's just like me, because my tastes are weird, man. Like, I freaking love Loom from 1992. Like, a lot of people would like be like, "Oh, okay, bud, yeah, you go sit in your special little corner or whatever." But like, so I don't want my weird taste to be totally killing things. I mean, I'm very much in the minority here as far as Secret of Mana. To be honest, I'm surprised there's even one other person who didn't care for Secret of Mana like I did, because everyone else I hear on the internet talks about how Secret of Mana is a masterpiece for soundtrack. Right. And yeah, so I mean, my ears are just weird. I don't know what to tell you, bro.
I smell a conspiracy going on.
Well, where were you on this one, Noah?
Well, I was the weirdo who went Contra 3, but I did put Secret of Mana in 2, and then I went Star Control in 3, and then I went Gabriel Knight, and then I went Illusion of Gaia.
Oh, wait a minute. So that means that Mitch was not... Oh, that's right. You switched your vote for Contra 3 because you thought it wasn't doing as much of that interesting, what's the word? Like narrative gameplay synergy and stuff like that.
Well, yeah, that's always a big reason, because Contra 3 was like my first choice in the earlier rounds of voting. And then when it came to the debate day, after I had my conversation with Tom, I was like, yeah, I kind of like Secret of Mana a little bit more. Like, Contra 3 is a nicely executed pick. I like what it's doing with it, but I also just felt like Secret of Mana had a little bit more of a challenge because, A, it was like a totally unique setting or type of game, because even though it was just a fantasy, it was also like a beat-em-up RPG, which is really unusual. So I felt like he had to operate in a very unique space to get that to work right. And also, like, the big thing for me, too, was how he sort of merged the melancholy of the story with the overly cutesy art style. And he kind of made the two of them talk together and create harmony. So they were just, like, stronger points that really settled for me as, like, yeah, this is the one that I think should win. And then I had Star Control 2 as a third choice. So you can kind of see how if you use star voting, people like me and Noah are kind of settling for our like third choice, but then it means people like Tom and that other person don't have to be stuck with their fifth, is kind of the pro and a con at the same time. But when you look at Star Control 2, only one person put it forward as their first choice. So it's kind of like only one person gets their preferred, whereas like Secret of Mana, you get a 1-1 and a 2-2. That's pretty good, all things considered, so... Yeah, and the reason why it switches is it depends on like who drops. And I guess this is where I interrogate the ranked choice a little bit, because what it has to do is it has to find somebody to eliminate, and obviously it's going to drop Illusion of Gaia because there's no first choice picks. And then it's going to drop Contra because the point score overall isn't quite as good. So then, Noah, your vote would get redistributed, and it goes out to Star Control 2.
Well, mine would go to Secret of Mana, not
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, yours goes to Secret of Mana. Yeah, correction. So Noah's vote drops. It goes to Secret of Mana, and it gives that three votes. And then Star Control 2 has to drop, and it redistributes that vote back out, and that one goes to Secret of Mana as well. And then Secret of Mana has 50% of the votes plus 1, and so it wins. Whereas if you did star voting, it would protect Secret of Mana and Star Control 2 immediately, because it would know from the beginning, oh, there's no way any of the other three are going to win. They just don't have enough support. And so it isolates the other two, and then it says, and it asks the Gabriel Knight people to weigh in on that. And so even though, Noah's vote will go to Secret of Mana, the other two from Gabriel Knight go to Star Control, and Star Control's point score is better. And so when you compare points to see who's going to win in a tie like that, it would be Star Control 2.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, even though Star Control 2 ranked higher in my voting score compared to Secret of Mana, given the point scores, I'm glad that Secret of Mana won over Star Control 2, because in general, I think that I think that better art tends to be the ones that certain people are really impassioned about and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so it's like for Star Control 2, it's like one that we all respect, we all like well enough, but like only one person of us is really on fire for it. Whereas like Secret of Mana, given that it's two people's favorite and two people's second favorite, there's a lot of people who are really like on fire for Secret of Mana. And so I'm glad we get to kind of honor that passion and the stuff that really leaves an impact on some people's lives, even if there's other people like me where it's just kind of like, meh, not my thing.
It's definitely one of the more interesting results that we had this year. And hey, Star Control 2 still took the silver. So once you eliminate the 1993 games, it goes to that one, which I think was a pretty cool win. But I think it also does promote some kind of funky outcomes like Best Music Track. And that went to Kitchen Ace for Doom. I have no idea how, but it did. So
I don't know. It's just music is subjective is all I can say at this point. Like, Guile's Theme was definitely my number one, bro, so I'm allowed to be right. You all could be wrong, but that's fine. It's all subjective at the end of the day, I guess.
Well, this was your number one too, wasn't it, Noah? It was Guile's Theme.
Yeah, it was. Now, it would have been Kitchen Ace, but I hate the 3DO version compared to the regular game version, so...
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, I guess you can take solace in the fact that it is the 3DO version, but also, like, it's still the song, so there's going to be lots of versions of the game. Yeah, and it's still awesome kind of thing, yeah. So I actually went with Wave 131 here, just because I really liked the Streets of Rage score, or Streets of Rage 2 score, and also Yuzo Koshiro has just done some incredible music. His name being on the title screen. Those were just like really unique arguments that I thought made it stand out and kind of interesting. So I wanted to do something a little bit spicy, but I didn't mean to go that spicy with Kitchen Ace. So I just did Wave 131 under the assumption, and then then the next step was like, I guess I'll go Kitchen Ace because everyone's gonna go for Guile's Theme anyways. And this is definitely a lesson I learned: is don't assume what everybody's gonna vote for, because lo and behold, we had someone put it in 5th place. And that just straight up killed it. And as, like, you can see everybody put at least a different, like, almost everyone disagreed on what should be the first choice winner. So as games were dropping, as they were dropping, though, everyone's second choice was Kitchen Ace, so it pulls ahead. And then, like, Guile's Theme never has a chance. And, I mean, I guess I'm, like, slightly, like, in a weird way pleased that it's this Rebel win that no one expects, because everybody just expects it to be a Guile's Theme. But I also just felt like Guile's Theme probably did deserve it. Like, I don't know. It was a weird one.
Well, a win for Doom is a win for humanity,
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, Doom, I definitely was being a little bit generous with Doom, I think, on most categories, believe it or not. Or maybe not me, but, like, I wasn't shooting it down when it was coming up in, like, gameplay and interface and stuff.
Yeah, well, I mean, strictly from the votes here, I mean, I'm glad that Kitchen Ace won, because, I mean, 4 out of 6 voters had it as their number 1 or their number 2, which means that they were highly pleased by it and whatnot. So it just, for whatever reason, the crowd wasn't digging Guile's Theme as much as I did, but given that they weren't, it's fair that it's there. That being said, though, yeah, I do personally think that, when you place your vote to avoid weird, unexpected outcomes, you should probably just vote for what you sincerely think are the best, and then you don't have to worry about, unexpected, because the crowd is going to probably be number one, it's unpredictable, and number two, it's a better reflection of everyone's taste if we all just kind of vote for what we think is best and stuff.
Well, that's what I did, like, because I did like, so I felt like Wave 131 deserved to win. I didn't like it quite as much as Kitchen Ace, but I was like, like, I want to check my bias here. I feel like the arguments are better for Wave 131, so I go there. Then I go for Kitchen Ace because I like that one more, and it's more,
okay.
So like Guile's theme, I just felt like deserved to win from like from an impersonal level. But if I'm just being totally impartial, that's what I meant by it. I was like, I expect that to win. I think it deserves to win. But it was like, I don't know that I would back it. Like, I hear the arguments and they're good. It was third place for me, for reference. I didn't put it at the bottom. I actually think I put In the Earth and Womb at the bottom. Just because it was like, I don't know, I just was not feeling the Illusion of Gaia. I think a part of me was like, you took 2 music slots. And like, I could see one, but it was like, I don't know. We already talked about this in the breakdown. It was that pick where I felt like so uncertain about it because there was things about it I liked, but things about it I didn't like, and so I was constantly torn with it. But yeah, no, I just voted honestly, like the way your style does. But it was just interesting to me. I was just reflecting on it, going like, wow, some of these results went in directions I didn't anticipate, even though I had initially put them down. But then I switched my vote somewhere down the line, and then, lo and behold, it still wins.
Okay, well, yeah, if that's the case, if you personally thought that Kitchen Ace and Wage for 131 were better, even though, like, in a quote-unquote impartial sense, you think Guile's team should have won, I think then that the voted ceremony is going the way it should be, and that this is a justified vote, even if the voting people here just have odd tastes and whatnot, but oh well, music is subjective, what can I say?
Do you think the world would have known the impact of Guile's theme when it came out, though?
No, because like Guile's theme specifically. Because the thing is that like, I think that the Street Fighter 2 soundtrack as a whole, it probably would have left a good impression on people. But like the 3DO version, if I remember correctly, actually let me see here. When did the 3DO port of SF2 come out? I think it was not the first version that came out for Street Fighter. So I suspect that like
3DO of Street Fighter. Do you mean the arcade or the?
Yeah.
Because the arcade
the 3DO is one of the arcade versions, if I remember correctly.
But the 3DO, that's the Doom pick. Did you pick the 3DO version for Guile's theme? I thought that was the arcade version.
Yes.
Oh, it was the 3DO.
Oh, wait. Okay. No, you're right. It's the CPS2. That's right.
CPS, that's what it was. Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, if I remember correctly, I don't think that the CPS2 was the first version of Street Fighter that came out. So I would suspect that at the time of Street Fighter's release, probably the original soundtrack with the first version of Street Fighter, that's probably going to be the one that left the strongest impression on people and is the one that had the most impact at the time. I think that, the other one's taken on meme-like status now and is, in my opinion, the best version of the theme now, but like, it sort of takes a long time for the initial first impressions to wear off and for the, cream of the crop to rise to, to amazing of all time status and whatnot. But that's just my opinion.
Yeah. I'm just curious because it's kind of a fun measure to think about because like our competitors, the Oscars, their whole job is to like essentially get a beat on culture if they can or history with the medium, and Guile's theme definitely, like from that perspective, yes, Guile's theme is more representative. People are much more aware of that theme. And the music of Street Fighter, probably in general. I mean, the music of Doom to a certain extent, but not necessarily Kitchen Ace. It doesn't quite have as much of a broader appeal. But yeah, if it wasn't something that was detected in the present time, then it sort of is, because that's where the Oscars, like, people get upset where they're like, oh, they made a mistake or whatever. It's kind of like, well, they sort of voted and what they thought would be important to, like, check in on down the line. And sometimes they're right and sometimes they're wrong. But that's just what makes it a fun and interesting conversation. As for us, we almost, like, don't have that excuse because we can look in hindsight. But at the same time, we do have to let, like, personal preferences come into play at some point. Because otherwise, then it is just, like, there's nothing to vote here. It's just everybody acknowledge Guile's theme once more, where, like, culture's already done that. So we almost, like, push back on it sometimes and be like, well, hey, maybe you should listen to Kitchen Ace and think about that and have conversations about that track. Because you could spotlight something else,
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what do you think of the sound atmosphere win? Because This one goes to Snatcher. And Zelda Link's Awakening actually has 3 first choice votes, so this is a very unusual outcome.
Huh, that is a bit unusual in terms of it. But I don't know. I mean, I suppose, given the vote breakdown, it makes some degree of sense and whatnot. I mean, Snatcher has 4 choices that are either first or second choice votes. And, like, you know, so that means it has a much clearer path to victory under ranked choice voting because, you know, you need to get 4 votes to win, or you need to win the tiebreaker and whatnot, you know.
Yeah.
And Zelda having 2 fifth choice votes, there was, like, well, I don't know. Oh, yeah, that's right. Actually, it had a reasonable chance to win, too. I guess it just didn't work out given everyone's preferences and stuff like that, because it had 3 ones and a third. So, seems like it was probably a pretty close race, all things considered. Was this one of the ones that would have changed with Star versus ranked choice, or is it the same either way?
Let's see. Star would have gone to... I don't think Star would change, because it would isolate Snatcher and Zelda from the very beginning, and then Snatcher has the better point score, and so...
Huh.
But the point score
points...
wouldn't matter to Star, it would just check, because Noah, you put Doom down for your first, and so it would have pulled you, it would have asked you to weigh in on the 2, and then when you went for Snatcher as second, is that right? Or was
I did that.
Okay, yeah, so your second Snatcher, so then Snatcher gets 3 votes, they both have 3, and then it would just compare points. And so, yeah, they come up with the same outcome.
Okay, fair enough. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, it still won a silver, so it's not like I'm particularly perturbed or anything like that. I mean, Zelda Link's Awakening was my first choice and stuff like that, but I don't know. I mean, it's, you know, lots of votes for both of them, so I mean, I could see it going either way overall.
Yeah, it was certainly neck and neck, and I do think that the...
Honestly, Zelda Link's Awakening, I'm surprised it did as well as it did, because I certainly love it to death, but like, I also don't know if that's just like a, you know, my ears have been so thoroughly attuned to it from playing it in my childhood that now it just sounds great to me. When...
Yes.
But apparently it's the same for other people too who played it. I don't know. I mean...
Right.
Yeah, it might have been my fault.
Your fault for... You put it as 3rd though, I think, right?
No, I put it as 5.
Oh, okay. So you were with me there.
I didn't think of it as much. Oh, okay, yeah.
So you and I kind of prevented it from winning on some level, Noah, because... this is the instance where the detractors matter, but the detractors matter whether you're in Star or ranked choice. It doesn't really matter what voting system you're using.
Well, they matter a lot more in Star than they do in ranked choice, but they matter at least somewhat for both of them.
Yeah, exactly. Because, you know, because it's our tiebreaking method, I mean, we really have to have it just because there's not enough voters. Maybe if we had, like, 20 voters or something, but, you know, that's maybe a possibility for down the road. I do like the idea of keeping it small, though, because it's just kind of easier to make sure we've assessed the arguments more thoroughly. I think we both agreed, Corbett, you and I, that Doom was a good second choice, and Noah was holding that line. But yeah, I felt like, I don't know, I felt like the voters maybe could have been a little more generous with Doom, because Doom is definitely, the reason I didn't put it in first choice was Doom doesn't like sound, it's not like I'm gonna play some Doom for that great sound, for the zombie noises and all the dying grunting sound, you know what I mean? It's not like a appeal of the game to listen to the sound, even though it's technically interesting. It just doesn't have like a strong, like, it's not going to be the reason I go back to it. I'm going to go back to it because of the gameplay, you know.
Yeah, I mean, Doom's no Link's Awakening, let's face it, all things considered.
Well, for me, like, Doom is white noise for me. Like, I go to sleep to that, so I got
it. Just ambient death noises. Yeah.
I mean, it does get carried a little bit by the shotgun effect. I feel like that one is like ASMR right there.
Yeah.
But like, yeah.
Sure.
The other ones, they're very good, they're very functional, but like, they don't quite have the just like, you know, click in the piece of my brain that says good video game sound, good, you know, play game good, you know.
Yeah. I get what you're saying.
Yeah, I feel like I should have, looking back, I probably would have voted Snatcher.
For your first?
Yeah, for my first.
I mean, that's a bit assuring then, because then it's the system genuinely working to its strength, right? What would push you over the edge for Snatcher?
Well, you know, I just like some of just the ambience to that game is really cool, and so Doom doesn't have the ambience going for it all the time. Like, there's some noises, But the main reason I voted for Doom was like, the different noises of each monster, so you could tell which one was which. And then
Yeah.
obviously the gun noises are pretty cool, but I think just more as a kind of game, like a game that kind of builds the noise around its world and stuff. Just Snatcher does that better than Doom.
Yeah, and I do
Yeah.
think that like Snatcher has a lot of lofty ambitions when it comes to sound and whatnot. I mean, especially even when they have that silly joke about, they make you turn up your volume really loud and then blow the building up. That probably gives it some points in sound atmosphere. But like, yeah, I would say that Snatcher has higher highs and lower lows for me, because at least at certain points in the game, the sound was a bit grating for me. But at the other times of the game, yeah, the sound was quite nice, and so it's not like I'm too upset that it ended up, winning and stuff.
That's a testament to just the nominee list being good. Because if you like the nominees, it's a little bit more justified. Like sometimes I feel like there's usually one that you're vying for, but I find myself at least there's generally like 3 that are kind of in the running for me, and I could potentially swing any of those directions. There's like 2 or 3. In a few cases this year, there was actually like 4 that I was really happy with on the list,
Nice.
or even 5. So yeah, that was pretty cool. Speaking of, technical artistry is one such category where I felt like all the nominees were really good. And this is our first genuine tie between Doom and Myst. Exact point values across the board.
Yep. I mean, I'm pretty happy with that outcome, all things considered. I mean, both have different claims to, the title to a certain extent, and, they are both doing really neat things. I mean, I do think that while, Contra, Aladdin, and Star Fox are good, I don't know if they have any, like, thing about them that's really, like, really
the
stand
caliber
out.
of the other 2, yeah.
Yeah, like, those 2 definitely seem like they're a cut above the other candidates here. Not that they're bad or anything like that. It's just that like Myst and Doom have some things about their technical artistry, not only that are just cool in their own right, but they kind of do really enable the game to function a lot better because of their technical artistry and stuff like that. I mean, I guess you could argue that for the other ones, but maybe it's just that the way that they're doing it is more innovative and more demanding technically, perhaps. I don't know. Hard to put my finger on it, but I overall, I see this, the fact that they won, and I feel like that's a good result considering.
I think it was really satisfying for me. So there was a mistake I actually made that you'll see in the winner's ceremony where when I told you, Noah, that you and Tom had flipped, that was true, but it was only true in different categories, and I had that part mixed up. So in Best Direction, I got you to flip from Star Control to Myst, but in Best Technical Artistry is where Tom flipped from Myst, because he was typically in that camp, and then he flipped to Doom in this one. So that's what happened there. So you 2 and Tom were in the Doom camp, and the rest of us were in the Myst camp. So but then we backed each other up as our second choices. So there's like no other quantifiable measure to separate these 2. It's just a bona fide tie. So it was really cool to see that pull ahead.
Oh yeah, actually, I am kind of curious throughout this whole thing if we might keep score on like how many times that we managed to get people to vote, like how many times Mitch got his pick in and how many times I got my pick in and whatnot. Because like me and him are the ones who are going to yak the most for sure, and we're also the most bitterly opposed to each other most of the time. And I know that last year, I mean, I feel kind of bad because like Mitch used a very like Mitch was too fair and objective last year, and so he lost out to my impassioned speeches. And so this time he's like, I have learned the ways of speechcraft and stuff like that. So he definitely had a better time. But yeah, like just counting up so far, if you scroll down a little bit, like how many of them were you?
Yeah, so narrative comp. Yeah, so this one, Star Control 2, that's a win for both of you guys, so you guys get a point. I technically had it as my first train, so yeah, I get it as a point as well. Now, if I had gone with Dragon Quest, then I suppose I would not get that point, but that's like a freebie that Star Control got, where normally I don't particularly do that. So yeah, not to say that it doesn't count in my favor, it does. Overall, I think like having a few extra voters did help, because part of the problem last time too is that like you would kind of rally the other 2 in your camp, and then I would just be like stuck by my own just voting, and there were so many, like half the ballot, it like legitimately didn't matter what I had voted for whatsoever. It was just totally gonna ignore me anyways. Whereas with the 6 votes, it very much did factor in if you were a detractor, and not like if you were by yourself. If you're the only detractor, that doesn't matter. But if you have someone else who's like an equal detractor, and then someone else who's like kind of leaning in that camp, now it starts to really punish the game's chance from winning. So I thought that was a more fair measurement. I kind of liked seeing that result. Not that I want to see stuff lose, but it just sort of made the stuff that won a clearer vision. Like you said, when you're looking at the 1-1-2-2 of original score, even though it's got 2 5s, 1-1-2-2 is a pretty good score among 6 voters. So there's still like that going for it. So yeah, okay. So that's 2 points. That's a point for all 3 of us then. And then as for best male character, Noah, you and I get a point because Papa's pulls ahead.
Yeah.
And then for female character, my first choice was Alice actually in this one. What was yours, Noah?
Grace.
Okay, so you guys get a point there. Are you keeping score, Corbett?
Yep.
Thank you. Okay, and then for original score, I had Secret of Mana, so that's a point for me. And then music track, nobody gets a point because Kitchen Ace was like second at best.
This is what happens when Guile's theme doesn't win. We all lose. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
Continue.
And then sound atmosphere, Snatcher was my number 1. I think that's just for me though, because then Noah, you were Doom, and then Corbett, you were Zelda.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of us get a point in technical artistry because it's a tie. And then moving on to interface, this is where we had 6 nominees. So yeah, this one was interesting. Doom does win. I made the argument for Illusion of Gaia, but I didn't really contest Doom very much. Because that was the thing, like, I don't feel like I attacked Doom too much except for Best Pixel. That was the only one where I really kind of... Or end-level design, I think I was a little bit more of a detractor. But for the other categories, it was more... And you guys can, let me know if that wasn't your experience of it, but I felt like that was more or less the case. But yeah, I didn't like... Like, I loved the the quintet style of interfacing. It's just so, so good. And as I'm playing more and more of their games, I'm like, man, these guys are just brilliant at what they do. So they're kind of like becoming the John Williams of music for me, where it's like I just want to see them nominated every year. I'd like to see them win eventually. Because last season I had ActRaiser for my first choice, and this one was Illusion of Gaia. So I'm like, Quintet, you can do this.
I feel that it's one thing is I feel like I'm kind of glad in some ways that like Snatcher got some wins this year, because I feel like Metal Gear is like a cool but flawed, or like all of Kojima's projects are like cool but flawed. So I expect that every year they're going to get a bunch of nominations, and I don't know how many wins they'll get. So it's like at least now we can say, okay, we gave Kojima some wins. We don't have to feel as bad if we end up stuffing him out of all the future categories and stuff.
What was your guys' first choice for interface?
Doom.
Mine was Doom, so I got my pick there.
Oh, okay, so you guys are both from the Doom camp. Nice. The reason we had 6 here is that there was a big debate between Ogre Battle versus Link's Awakening, and everybody was like very slightly leaning towards Ogre Battle, but it was so slight, and especially because it was like my like 3rd pick or something like that, and it was versus someone else's first choice. So it was kind of like is that enough to bump out somebody's first choice? So I figured, what the hey, I'll just throw the extra one in just so that way there's a little bit more representation, because part of the theme this year was to, represent as many games as possible. Not just for the heck of it, but just because there's a lot of interesting stuff, and I wanted to kind of really grow the channel and make it very competitive. But you can see here, Ogre Battle just got totally destroyed. So part of me wonders if, like, maybe it was clear at that point, early on, that Ogre Battle does not have an actual standing here, and I maybe should have just pulled it and let the argument go. That's just some reflection on my part.
No, Ogre Battle was good. I'm not upset that it got nominated and stuff like that. It has a nice interface. It's just, at the end of the day, something's got to lose. So, it's just, the other ones are just even better.
Yeah, and that's always a tricky thing because, sometimes, I mean, if you look at, like, technical artistry, Aladdin, Contra, and Star Fox all have, like, horrible scores. But they don't have horrible scores. It's just that everybody was, committed to Doom and missed. That's, so it's... Sometimes the votes are misleading in that way.
Mm-hmm.
And then for art direction, this went to Snatcher. Almost unanimously. This was a really good score for Snatcher.
Were you in the Snatcher camp?
No, I was not. I was for ActRaiser 2.
ActRaiser 2,
okay.
That's right.
Also a very solid pick, so no worries there.
Snatcher was your second, though, right?
Yeah, it was.
And then Corbett, this is the only category for which we agreed on.
Yep. So you can't say I am nothing but contrarian. See, well, actually, no, we technically agreed also on Star Control for narrative, but like that was a reluctant agreement, whereas here it was a reasonably emphatic agreement, at least among the candidates that we had remaining. So that feels good to actually be on the same page for one category for once.
It does. That was fun. When we got to that, too, it was basically because it was time to debate, and we were both Snatcher, and then everyone was like, yeah, okay, so, like, you two are in agreement here, so what's the reason? And we were like, I mean, we can argue this to death, but, like, we've just decided, like... So we, like, both, like... Basically, we both doubled down on Snatcher in that moment and explained some reasons, and then everything else was just, like, without any kind of defenders to support it, so... I mean, we did play the recap video so people could absorb some of the visuals, and then they made their choices from there. And clearly that did sway a couple people, but... Yeah, it was funny that we were both like, usually the two biggest voices in the room, when they disagree, you know, that makes all the friction. But in this case, we agreed, so everyone was kind of like stunned for a moment. I'm like, oh, I guess this is where we're going.
I feel like much more so, like, it could be our arguments, it could be the showcase we put together, but I almost wonder if, like, more than either of those is the fact that everyone in the room was like, oh my gosh, Corey and Mitch both agreed. It must be really good.
Right. It must have been like, wow, well, I guess there's no argument necessary. If you guys agree, then dang. And then best gameplay, Fellowship and Relaxation. This went to Secret of Mana with 3 first choice votes. And Super Mario Kart took the silver with 2 first choice. I should be saying the silver each time. For art direction, the silver was ActRaiser 2, so you were not alone in that. Noah?
Yay.
And...
I wasn't quite a loser.
You were what?
I wasn't quite a loser, I guess, for that one. I thought I was going to be completely alone for ActRaiser 2, but I'm glad I'm not.
No, I mean, it was me and Mitch's second choice. It was still really good looking and whatnot.
Yeah.
Also, what is up with the red options for Ultima and Contra, exactly?
Oh, those are the bronze winners. So, they were the only games from 1992. So, if I remove all the 1993 games, which is what from the year that won, because like Doom and Myst were both from 93. So after you pull them out, and then all the other 93 games, you're left with only one choice, which is Contra 3 and Ultima. So they can't get the silver at that point because they're not actually competing with anything, so it's just a bronze.
Yeah. So, Noah, were you in the Secret of Mana camp for Fellowship and Relaxation?
I was.
Okay. Nice. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like that's probably a good result at the end of the day, because, like, you know, I mean, Secret of Mana didn't quite tickle my fancy, but I definitely could at least see some merits there, and I can see why it'd be somebody's, you know, super jam as far as Fellowship and Relaxation. Whereas, like, my number one pick was, like, Mario Kart, but, like, given that there's, like, so many Mario Karts, and that, like, you know, they all play pretty similarly, I don't know if Mario Kart's really going to go down in history as, like, the games of all time in the same way that, like, Super Mario is going to leave that real lasting impression on people. So, in some ways, I'm glad that one won Fellowship and Relaxation.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. My final, you know, because I was leaning on Goof Troop for a while, but then Goof Troop took, like, a hit at the very last moment because, you know, some new information came to light because you found out that it was way too short for your liking, and then I found out that Secret of Mana, the length of it wasn't a detracting factor for Tom, and that was like my main concern of it because we had talked about how that was a bit of a con, is that it was just overstayed its welcome. But then, like, he was like, no, actually, he's like, yeah, I mean, it's definitely too long, but, you know, it's not the kind of blemish that makes me not want to play it. It just means you have that much more to enjoy it. That's going to be more of a personal, person-to-person preference thing. So, yeah, it's weird how, like, length was sort of a big deciding factor in how that came down for you and me, Corbett.
Yeah, well, it's especially, I think that it's more so even than other categories, is how much length affects Fellowship and Relaxation. Because if it's really long and you just get bored, like for me at least, I'm not relaxed at that point anymore. I'm like, you know, I'm forcing myself to keep playing it because it's like, well, I've already sunk so many hours into it, I have to finish it. And then at that point, it's less relaxing and more just, you know, tiring and stuff like that, you know. But like, and similarly, you know, it's like if it's only a 2-hour game, it's like, you know, well, I can only extract so much Fellowship and Relaxation out of 2 hours Like, you can make a 2-hour narrative, which is going to completely stick with you for the rest of your life, and they can really hit home with you. But if you're just, like, mellowing out, zoning out, it's, like, hard to really leave a super lasting impression in the span of, like, 2 hours, I would think.
Mm.
I want Secret of Mana. A couple reasons were, like, I just like how it was, like, one of the games that, you know, you could have up to 3 people instead of 2 for everything else. And then I just didn't really like the gameplay to Goof Troop that much. It just didn't appeal to me. And then I just didn't care much about Super Mario Kart because there's just so many of them that's going to come up. So it's like, I'd rather have something cooler win this year because I'm sure eventually, like, you know, Super Mario Kart 8 or something might win later on.
Honestly,
Yeah,
I
or
kind of
Double
doubt
Dash.
it, because the problem is that our award ceremony is set up to be very unfavorable to sequels, because we only judge the sequels on, like, what they did different from the previous ones. And because every Mario Kart is usually just a fairly incremental improvement, I might expect to see some nominations here or there, but I doubt it's going to really be able to win when it's just because there's so many entries and they're always just slightly improving on the last entry, I feel.
If Guile's theme losing best music track is any kind of precedent, then yeah, you're probably right. I wonder though, do you think you would fare more favorably towards Mario Kart if it wasn't even nominated? Like let's say we have, you know, Mario 64 or Double Dash or something nominated, but Super Mario Kart was never nominated. Would that be like more of a reason to pick it for a win, do you think?
I don't know where I stand on that. I think I would still mostly judge it on how it's improved from the previous one. I only grant exceptions if, like, the previous game was, like, before our Game Awards started, like from 1988 or something like that. I think then I would give it a pass because we could never possibly have judged its merits. But I think that if it was in the era of the Game Awards we'd be judging it, I think I would still try to mostly judge it on how it's improved, but I'm not entirely set in stone on that.
That's fair. Where do you stand on that, Noah? I'm kind of curious now.
I don't really know. I mean, part of me is just I don't care for the Mario type games, so I probably wouldn't have. It wouldn't have
Mario
changed much
type
for me if
game.
it was different. Yeah, well, I mean, Mario's in the name, right? So no, but like,
No, I gotcha.
yeah, the game just didn't appeal to me that much.
Yeah.
So I don't think it would have changed much if it was a different game.
So have you never had, like, a sibling or a family get together where you were all able to huddle around and play Mario Kart together?
I don't have a family. No. We used to. Oh, dude! Back in the day when we had the N64, and it was the Cube, the GameCube, and then we did what's it called? Mario
Double
Party.
Dash?
Mario Party.
Oh,
Mario
okay,
Party
yeah,
was a
that's a good
lot of
time.
fun.
Oh, Dad, you played number 4 with the Millennium Star, I think, for GameCube, right? Or was that might have been still N64, actually. Yeah, I think that was N64 still.
The third one is the last one on N64. The fourth one is on GameCube. But the third one has the Millennial Star, I think. The mustache
got it.
star. Yeah.
Yeah. But okay, yeah. Yeah, honestly, Mario Party, well, it used to be the only game that could provide you that kind of experience. And I mean, in some ways it still does, but now Dokapon Kingdom has come around to provide a different Mario Party experience, which has been very intriguing for me lately.
Yeah.
But yeah,
it's
Mario
pretty
Party is a good
interesting
time. I'm glad it exists.
I can't wait for Wii Sports to come up for best fellowship and relaxation.
Oh yeah, that totally deserves at least a nomination for sure.
Well, it deserves a win, but yeah.
We'll have to wait and see what it's
Esports,
competing against.
yeah.
I can't judge it too strongly in advance, but I will tell you though, I sunk a butt ton of hours into that, especially playing with my brother. Me and him got super competitive in the Wii Sports tennis game. Like, I think that, like, our point score was up in the, like, upper hundreds, maybe even crossed 1,000 at some point. I'm not sure, but we really went at it.
Fellowship and relaxation is an interesting new category because it really doesn't have, like, all the nominees are on Super Nintendo. None of them, except for Dragon Quest V, are up for Best Pixel. And, like, if you look down the list, that's kind of unusual. You get typically at least 2, if not 3. Like, Technical Artistry has 3. Interface is 2. Art Direction only has... Oh, Art Direction has 2. Original Score has 4. Yeah, so like you look down the list, you're typically seeing Best Pixel nominees all over the place, and Fellowship and Relaxation had so few of that. Even Dragon Quest was basically lucky to be there, just sort of riding on the fact that it had done so much to streamline the tabletop RPG, or the, not tabletop, but the fantasy role-playing video game experience. But that credit largely goes to the original, which, again, gets kind of a pass because the original was long before 1990, so this was like kind of a first opportunity to recognize that. But it's also not like the most refined gameplay, let's be real. So it's just kind of interesting to see how this category deviated really hard from what like the main ballot looks like. But I kind of think that's cool, because like Wii Sports, I don't see that doing well in any category except for this one. And so I kind of wonder how many games, like, you know, you mentioned Mario Party as well.
I mean,
like, I could totally
I
see
think
Mario Party here and nowhere else.
Wii Sports definitely deserves a Best Interface nomination for all the ways it uses the Wiimote, I think.
No, skip that. It's got to be Best Male Character, Matt.
Matt the Destroyer.
I don't know enough about Wii Sports, so yeah, maybe I'm underselling it, but I just kind of throwing it out there that it's my prediction that Fellowship and Relaxation will deviate from the Best Pixel nominees hard down the line, because you're going to get stuff like Mario Party, which, you know, I don't really see that competing for Best Pixel or really anything else at some point, but is it fun? Yeah, so, you know, you get interesting results.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's an example of a very well-crafted category, because I mean,
Agreed.
The whole point of these categories is to show the different ways that games can excel, you know. And honestly, I feel like Fellowship and Relaxation, because it so often does operate in a way that's very opposed to a lot of other aspects of good games, it oftentimes kind of just doesn't really get recognized enough in the Game Awards or, you know, any other awards ceremony. So it feels really good that we are getting a chance to shine a light on those games for doing what they do so well.
No, agreed. I'm super happy that we have the category. I think it's a worthy addition for sure. I don't want to get on the soapbox of other award shows not acknowledging gameplay categories, but that's going to be for another time for sure. They have a supreme lack of doing that, and we have 3, so take that.
I'm surprised. I didn't think you ever got off that soapbox, bitch. I thought it was just always on. No, I'm just kidding. Sorry.
It's like caging up a beast temporarily. All right, let's talk about Best Gameplay Discovery and Expression. So this one goes to Star Control 2. And a pretty unexpected win, because I don't think it was any of our first choice, was it?
Wasn't mine.
Wasn't, nope, mine was still Doom.
Yeah, and then you were in Rondo of Blood, right?
Yep,
right.
I was in Rondo. You were Mega Man X, I believe. And then, yep, so, but honestly, you know, I mean, I'm not particularly upset. Because the thing is that, like,
yeah,
I wonder if part of this might just be because the other people who were voting didn't have as much firsthand experience with the game, because I do think that Star Control 2, it's got the most ambitious discovery, and it sounds the best in theory. The only reason why it's not number 1 is because in practice, it's a bit rough around the edges. It's still quite good, though, so I mean, I'm not upset that it won. But the ways in which it's not that quite ideal wouldn't necessarily be apparent unless you're somebody, you know, who really played it, like, you know, the whole way through and stuff like that. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's still a very worthy win. It was high up on my rankings, even if it wasn't my number 1. So yeah.
Was it your number 2 or your number 3?
Well, it was number 3. Actually, it's funny I say that, because it's still, I was the
you're the biggest detractor.
Yeah. But whatever, I wasn't a detractor by that much. Honestly, Discovery and Expression was one where I thought there were really good merits to all 5 of them to a certain extent. So, you know, it's not like there was a huge gap between my number 1 and my number 2 and my number 3 and stuff.
Yeah. Were you surprised this one, Noah?
A little bit. I mean, yes and no. I felt like it could have gone to a couple different games. Like, I was definitely thinking I was going to take out Rondo of Blood and Zelda. Like, I didn't think they were going to win. So it's going to be between Doom, Mega Man, and Star Control.
That's fair.
I'm actually a little bit surprised that Mega Man got silver, but I kind of agree. Thinking about it now, like Star Control just has some really great discovery aspects. Like and that's partially because of me. I think I should have gone first for this one compared to Doom, but I just love being able to explore around the world and find, like, you know, new people, and especially with this, it's new species. Each of them having their own different personalities and beliefs. So it just makes it extra cool to explore the world.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about Star Control 2 is that, like, the payoffs you get for Discovery are the biggest out of all the categories. But, like, it's more infrequent and harder to get those payoffs in some cases when you're just like, okay, where the heck do I go next? And you have to really rummage for a while. But then you find a species and you get a whole conversation tree and the art and the sound, like the fresh soundtrack song. And yeah, it's really great payoff when you do finally come across those new species for sure.
Yeah, and I think I didn't put in first because I had the detractor of, like, the planets can also just be really boring. Because just, you grab some resources, then you go to the next one and grab some more. You don't find anything cool, and then you just keep doing that for a little bit until you finally find something.
Yeah, well, Noah, you've played the Mass Effect games, right?
Yep.
So Mass Effect 1's Mako was directly inspired by the planet gameplay of Star Control 2, and Mass Effect 2's scanner gameplay, I would say, is vaguely similar to Star Control 2. I do think that Star Control 2, they do make some efforts to spice up the planet gameplay a bit, but at the same time, like, and that keeps it fresh for a while, but it takes up such a large portion of the game, and it's, like, such a big game that, like, it still did get old after a while, unfortunately. So, yeah, unfortunately, a bit of a detracting factor. But the cool aspects, it's still not terrible, and there are some other aspects of the Discovery that are top notch. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, narrative comp and gameplay discovery, I think were like Star Control 2's best path to victory for best pixel. So I can kind of see that thread, and like, you know, it was my second choice just because I gotta hand it to the ambition of what it was trying to do. I'm more willing to forgive some of the hiccups because it is a really ambitious project, you know. Whereas, like, I don't know, I guess you could argue they're all kind of ambitious in their own way, but it just felt like Star Control 2's ambition was pretty vast. And yeah, I mean, I don't know, I still lean towards Mega Man just because, like, of honoring the series from before this point, sort of like the same reasoning behind what was I talking about before? Where it was like Mario Kart or whatever, like you eventually, or Dragon Quest, where you eventually nominate it, even though because the past entries were not like eligible as options. So that was like part of the reason, but also like I like that it did Discovery and Expression really well together, and they were kind of like synergistic. But yeah, I guess the argument didn't hold up quite as strongly as Star Control. I think the sentiment for Star Control in the room was really high, and I don't know that there was any way to really counteract that, or at least you can only counteract it so many times, you know? It was not like in Under Sound Atmosphere, you know, Star Control was there as well, but we really didn't talk that much about it, because we had already kind of decided it was between Doom, Snatcher, and Zelda. And then there were some Mega Man fans in there as well. So, like, Star Control 2 didn't really, like, enter that equation very much, and that happened to it a couple of times in other categories, so yeah, interesting path to victory, but pulled ahead in the end. And then best gameplay, challenge, and achievement, and this one went to Doom.
Okay, so that was Noah. That was your first pick, I imagine. Was it also yours, Mitch?
Yep.
Nice.
And then you were in the Rondo of Blood camp.
Yep. I mean, I was sort of expecting as much. I mean, I'm, very much a fan of Rondo of Blood, but I mean, in some ways, I can see that the arguments in favor of Doom are somewhat better and whatnot, just because they're a bit. But I don't know though. Just the actual way it just meshed for me personally, it definitely. I couldn't justify putting it as anything but my number one because in terms of the actual enjoyment I got out of it, it's just top notch.
Yeah, well, and to be fair, your arguments were strong enough to bump it from 5th place to 2nd for me, because Rondo of Blood was at the bottom of mine just because my personal experience of it was so terrible. But then, like, I heard you talk about it, and I did some research and was like, wow, okay, there's a lot of die-hard fans who will die on the hill of Rondo of Blood for just how novel and interesting it is from that, challenging gameplay perspective. So I basically, it was nice to go through the ballot and be like, okay, well, I'll give you number 2, and if you have other people in the room supporting you, then you're going to win. Because it's a similar thing what I did with female character, where Alice is my first choice, but, I didn't deliberately try to hurt Grace, even though I knew she had a good chance of winning. I was like, I'm just giving her the 2nd, because that's where, she deserves to be for me. So I'm going to concede the argument if I've got, if the voters went in that camp to go for Grace, I don't want to be the person that stops Grace from winning, and it gets some weird awkward result. So it was a similar thing here, but yeah, I just don't know if it quite had as strong support, because I mean Doom's score is like 4 first choices and then 2 seconds, like, and you're one of those seconds, so it's not even like
Sure.
just
I
like
mean,
the
I was
math
still
doesn't
really
lie.
high on
You
my
get what I'm
thing,
saying?
so
Yeah.
yeah, it's not like I'm that upset or anything that my number 2 won.
And Noah, if you have any gloating you need to do, you can get it off your chest
Oh,
now, because this is Doom's win.
yeah. Well, like I said earlier, a win for Doom is a win for humanity. So hopefully that will. This is the last Doom win, right? So
Yep, I think
I'll
so.
soak it in for a couple more seconds, and then we can move on.
You're just gonna play your mixtape of zombie grunts and
Yeah.
gunshots.
Yeah. Okay, my couple seconds of gloating is over. We can move on.
Alrighty. So talking about best level design next, and this one went to Shinobi 3. That was my first choice, and I actually, whose first choice was that? Where were you guys on this one?
I was number 1. What about you, Noah?
Thought I moved it to number 1, but I think I didn't. I just kept Doom.
Oh,
Okay,
gotcha.
that's fine.
Ongoing pattern for me, I guess.
Yeah, no worries. I mean, Doom was my number 2, so also very solid choice. I don't know. I am kind of glad between Shinobi winning this and, in some ways, Doom winning, what is it called? Best song. It's like, it definitely still shows that Oscarinas are beholden to nobody. We got our own path in some cases. We gotta make we gotta make the audience at least a little mad every year. What can I say? So it's
seriously, it wouldn't be interesting to watch if we didn't go off the beaten path from time to time. Nobody wants the season to be so predictable that it's just, expected every year. That's just not exciting. But, it's not even just that. So this was the category where I actually really loved all 5 choices at the end of the day. I was like, man, these are great picks for this category. And the arguments were solid. They all were rooted in something really compelling. And I literally could have gone in any direction. So, like, the choice to go with Shinobi was just to kind of find a way to cut through the red tape, and that was definitely the one I was most passionate about, because it had got such a visceral reaction out of me, and it kept me playing, even though there were so many things about its other design elements that I couldn't stand. So it was interesting that it was holding its ground just so hard, and I thought, okay, like, I would be doing myself a disservice if I put it any lower than first just for that reason alone, because it left such a, deep impression on me. But it was cool to see that other people were receptive to that argument, even the ones that I didn't talk to quite as extensively about it, how they were like, yeah, I must have done a decent job, like, conveying that too in the video. It was definitely longer than a lot of the other ones because there was just so much to unpack with it. So, but I wasn't really thinking of trying to, like, strengthen the argument when I did that. I was just trying to articulate the experience, which was so visceral that really pulled through.
Yeah, I think that like Contra 3 and Shinobi 3, in some ways, they have a advantage in being like shorter games for level design because of the fact that like both when you're playing and when you're watching it, there's just like a constant onslaught of like new and cool ideas that are being thrown at the player and stuff like that. Whereas like Doom being a moderate length game, it still has interesting ideas, but it sort of puts them out at like a measured pace, such that like, you're always having like a reasonably good time, but nothing that's quite as much of a non-stop stream of like, over the top something, be it the action of Contra 3 or the ninja cheese of Shinobi 3 and stuff like that. So, yeah.
The awesome per second was a little less for you.
Yeah.
I got you. It was good, though, Noah, that you stuck with Doom in a lot of cases, because it was essentially throwing Doom back in the ring every time it would show up. Because if you weren't doing that, and you started to deviate and go with, like, Shinobi here or whatever, it's possible that in other categories Doom would have lost. You know what I mean? And because it's like overall, so like you were kind of like, okay, Doom is in the running every time it shows up, pretty much. And it was up to the other voters to present a strong argument against it or come up with valid reasons to vote for something else, which I think is like true to how the system should work.
Yeah, but I feel like there's a couple like that I knew it wasn't going to win, so I should have just deviated towards that. Like, I knew that Shinobi 3 was going to win because we kind of talked about it, but...
well, see, it seemed that way because the argument was good when we were talking about it. But, the arguments for Guile's theme were great. I don't see any reason why people didn't go with it.
Well, don't worry. We kicked that guy off the Oscarinas, right? If not, I'm gonna become Napoleon. You know, I have found the crown of France and I have put it on my head. I'll become Napoleon.
Yeah, that's what we should do. We should totally just kick Mitch out for submitting that song, and then we'll just do all the work. I'm sure. Yeah, no, actually, you proposed it, so you can just take over doing all the video editing for hours on end, right?
I'll find a way.
Yeah, it is a funny outcome because there's a major detractor on Gala's theme, but also, like, if I just hadn't have put Kitchen Ace in, then I don't think we would have rallied behind. I mean, I guess we could have rallied behind whatever else was in its place, but yeah, I don't know. Kitchen Ace that was my jam. That was a great entry point to the music and the whole world of Doom for me, so it's funny.
Ace sets the pace.
Okay, and then best direction. So this one went to Mist with 4 first choice votes and 2 second choice, and then the silver went with Star Control 2. So this is the one
Interesting that we were so close. I mean, if it just one person I had swayed from Mist to Star Control, it would have been a tie.
Ooh, that would have been me, but I went Mist, so sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Revenge!
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, this one I was pretty happy about, though. I felt like the arguments were really solid for Mist.
I'm sure you were happy about it. No, I'm just kidding. Sorry.
Well, Star Control did bump up to my second choice again. This was another one where I was torn between Dragon Quest V and Mist a lot. It was really like Assault Suits and Dragon Quest, and then Mist kind of came up later. And then as the conversations were going, and we were recording episodes and talking about it, I was just like, sheesh. It's just like a never-ending pit with this game. So that really pushed Mist over the edge for me, and then I was like in full commitment mode at that point. But yeah, I really liked all the choices here. I mean, Illusion of Gaia is like the obligatory quintet game because they're just so freaking fascinating. It's weird to not see them for direction, just because they're always trying to do something really interesting and different that other game developers wouldn't even bother to consider. Like, they would just look at it and go, well, we just need action, or we're just making an adventure game, so just focus on that. And the cool thing about all the direction nominees is each of them is trying to do something more than just be a game. So they really did push themselves. And you guys got your revenge in the end, because Best Pixel 1992 goes to Star Control 2, but just barely.
Yeah, at the end. Somehow, just barely, but whatever. I'll take my win while I can have it.
I was pretty nervous about that because I remember you and I were talking about that it was pretty much a tie between Snatcher and Star Control. So
yeah.
The thing is that, like, I say how I'm like just like a go with the flow kind of guy, like, oh yeah, the voting system works, and everyone has subjective at the end of the day, but like, I would have been at least mildly upset if Star Control 2 did not win 92 Best Pixel, because in my opinion, that one really deserves it. Well, not, I mean, it just has so ridiculously much going for it, and like, especially in comparison to the other ones. I mean, I get that Snatcher is a cut above the line for like a visual novel, but like, just compared to like the ridiculous amount of stuff that they put into Star Control 2 and pulled it off reasonably well, like, I just feel like there's no contest, but that's just my own personal preference.
That's fair. If we were to do it now, I would be putting Snatcher as my number 1 instead of Dragon Quest V. Not because, obviously, I don't have enough support for Dragon Quest V, but because, like, Snatcher, I was already vying for in sound atmosphere and art direction, which it won. So now it has an actual path to victory, but more importantly, because I don't see any visual novel being like as good as Snatcher, or being as flashy or impactful or like epic in scale. Like, visual novels just cannot, like, their limitations are just all over their sleeves, and Snatcher managed to really reach beyond that point. So even though, like, yeah, Star Control is the more impressive game as a game, but like, Snatcher is the more impressive visual novel compared with all visual novels. So there's,
so let me,
a strength to that.
Yeah, so again, this is just me being salty and whatnot, but it's like, yeah, you could say that there's certain things that make Snatcher, a bit of a, above average, like cut above, unique visual novel. as opposed to, Star Control 2, really, I mean, it's just kind of like average compared to all the other, like asteroid simulator, giant open world exploration storytelling with adventure and multiple huge branching story paths and like gameplay narrative synergy. Like, there's no other game even like Star Control 2. So I feel like if you compare like something that's above average for a genre versus like a game that's basically like one of a kind, I mean, I feel like for me, the one of the kind game wins, but that's just my personal opinion.
If you wanted to go with one of a kind, then I think you should have been going for Snatcher all along. Because Snatcher is way different for a visual novel. And the thing with Star Control 2 is you could just play Mass Effect.
No, Mass Effect is not really scratch the same itch as Star Control 2 for me personally. I mean, it's got like a good story, but it doesn't have a story that's really centered around exploration and uses the exploration narrative synergy in the same way that Star Control 2 does and whatnot. Not to mention that, I don't know, I mean, like, Star Control 2 does explore a lot of much more like weird out there science fiction concepts, albeit at the cost of, immersion and plausibility in some cases because it's really out there. But like, I mean, the whole concept of having just like human emotions turned up to 11 and turned into like alien species such that like you talking to them is like exploring a part of your psyche. Like, I don't know if like, I mean, mind you though, I only played like half of Mass Effect 2 or so, maybe a bit more than half. So yeah, so I mean, I can't fully make the comparison or anything like that, but I don't know. For me, at least, Star Control 2 felt pretty different even from Mass Effect 2.
Well, it's definitely very different from Mass Effect 2. I don't think it's quite so different from Mass Effect 1.
Or 3.
Yeah, or 3 for that matter, actually. Yeah, you're right. So, yeah, I guess, because here's kind of the major question, or the big concern, which is why Star Control went to third slot for me. Because I definitely don't like how other Game Awards just pick the same game. Like we just picked this, and now we're gonna pick it again. They'll be like, they'll do like Zelda Breath of the Wild, and then they'll do like Elden Ring, and it's like, okay, obviously those are vastly different games, but what are they? They're both big budget open worlds. You could say, the SparkNotes version of the two games is identical, so it's kind of like, after a while, you just start to feel like there's clearly more variety out there, and why aren't you going for that variety? So, I don't know, but maybe I'm wrong on that. Like, do you feel like the Mass Effect 1 is different enough, Noah, from Star Control 2?
I think the difference is that Star Control 2, like, well, you going out and exploring and fighting the new aliens is, to a degree, a one-of-a-kind thing compared to Mass Effect, especially because just about all the species are, have been discovered, and there's a couple in Mass Effect 3, but overall,
oh, I see. We already know them. It's discovery for you, but not for the world.
Yeah. But then at the same time, I think the difference is that with Mass Effect, your discovery is more through a human emotion, and you kind of like, some of the outcomes in the game, the way you discover the alien races are a lot different. Like with the genophage, or specifically one of my favorite is with the Geth at the end of Mass Effect 3. If does this vessel have a soul? Like the way that it does its discovery is different, but overall, I think they're different enough to not necessarily have to compare them, but they're similar in a couple different aspects.
So I guess a revised question, Noah. Do you think that the difference between Star Control versus Mass Effect 1 is larger or smaller than the difference between Snatcher and your average visual novel?
No. Well, I think, like, Snatcher is kind of unique and one of a kind, at least from what I've seen compared to all the other visual novels. But I think it's similar to the way that Star Control is. It's one of an own thing, but it does have similarities with a lot of other games.
So would you say that they're both similarly different or similarly unique? Or would you say that one is more unique than the other?
I think both are unique. I can't say that one is more unique than the other. But
Cop out! No, that's fair.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it may not matter because it's just a personal taste of mine for where my votes go. For some people in the room, mentioning that Star Control 2 was like a precursor to stuff like Mass Effect was a point in its favor to them, because it meant that, okay, so now I can archive the game that led us to this point, and that's cool. There's an appeal to that for them. For me, I kind of didn't see it that way. It sort of hurts it because now I'll be less inclined to go with Mass Effect for Best Pixel, Mass Effect 1 specifically, just because I'm like, well, the player that I envision playing Best Pixel is the person who's literally doesn't play anything else. They just play every Best Pixel winner in a row. And if they play Star Control 2, it's a lot harder to recommend Mass Effect because I know I'm giving them, on some level, a very similar experience. They're both science fiction games. Both of them involve you flying around and talking to aliens and doing sci-fi things. They both involve
That's what every sci-fi game does, though. I mean, are there any sci-fi games that don't involve? Well, I guess there's dystopias and stuff like that. But I mean, it feels like you're kind of just lumping the whole genre together if you just talk about exploring and talking to aliens with sci-fi, right?
Well, part of it is going to be that, though, because again, like what I said between Breath of the Wild and Elden Ring, like I would just decide for myself which of those two games I would be more willing to put forward in advance. That way I don't run into this problem. And a part of you is like, you can't do that if you're picking them as they release. So eventually this will reach a point where I won't be able to do that. But at that point, then it's just like your priority shifts to go with something different. Not necessarily every year, but just to kind of be a little bit more on the radar. It's like, if Call of Duty wins, are you really going to go with Halo the following year? It's like a harder pill to swallow, or like Battlefield 1984 or whatever it was. Because I think the DICE Awards has that. It's like 2 military first-person shooters back-to-back. It's like, why? You need to pick something different because you're not really showing what the medium can do in all its diversity, especially with video games where they're so vastly different year to year. I mean, they just change dramatically all the time. So, yeah, I don't know. But then the other part of it is like, what is it up against, right? And for 1992, it just didn't feel like Contra was very competitive. The other options instead of it weren't very competitive either. And then Street Fighter 2, like, that was like potentially a good option just for the sake of, what it represents, and it would have been a chance for a fighting game to win. But it was really hard when like so much of it had just been dependent on the cultural context that now no one can experience. So I was like, I really just can't justify going in that direction for it. And then Dragon Quest I did like the best because I love how it took, how it is representative of how frustratingly bogged down the entire genre had become. And I don't really see Dragon Quest games ever doing well in the future. And I also feel like, yeah, we'll see other fantasy RPGs, but Dragon Quest is still going to be unique among them because it's just the straight up bare bones of it. Like, I could see someone playing Dragon Quest 5, and then I could give them another fantasy RPG like Final Fantasy or something. But that's going to be a wildly different experience in terms of like how they approach everything. Whereas like with Star Control, it had that kind of modern smoothness to it that made it feel like it's like it kind of detracted a bit somewhat for me, because now it's like, all right, well, if you're just going to be like a modern smooth game, then you're not really representative of the time very well. But, I don't know. These are just kind of my stray thoughts because there's lots of different ways to take it, and only time will tell what actually is going to pull ahead based on like what it's up against and what it's going to represent in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, that being said, though, I mean, I didn't get a chance to really mention it just because I was trying to consolidate my points to the bare minimum during debate day and stuff like that. But like, and also because it wouldn't exactly hurt my case or help my case. But I think I pretty strongly disagree with you about Star Control 2 being a modern, smooth kind of game. You're literally expected to like write stuff down that you're not going to use for like 5 or 6 hours later in the game. And there's also points where, oh, you didn't ration enough fuel for yourself? Okay, well, I guess you're in an unwinnable state. Got to go back to an earlier one. Oh, you diplomated wrong with the alien species that's essential for your survival? Oh, guess you got to revert back to an earlier state. Oh, whoops, you didn't do your thing in a perfectly efficient method to get yourself in the time to win the game before the aliens invade the galaxy? Well, guess you gotta revert back to 20 hours earlier. Or wait, you only had one save file. Start the whole game over, punk! Like, those are not, like, anything you would remotely expect from, like, a modern, smooth game and stuff, for me personally.
Yeah, I guess that's true. I wonder why I have this image of it being such a modern title. I mean, because when I played it, I fired it up and I was just like, this just fits like a glove. There's nothing about this that feels even remotely dated. And that was
I think it's because basically they removed the parts of, like, because they're good game designers, they made it smooth quality of life where they could, but the places where there is rough quality of life were essential for the experience that they were trying to create. But those are still really big, rough around the edges things for the experience they were trying to create. It's just that they're good game designers, so they removed a lot of they have a lot of other quality of life improvements, but the ones that remain are still very significant in my opinion.
I see. Yeah, that's fair. It's definitely an interesting win. I don't dislike it. It just makes me squeamish for like, it's like cashing in your sci-fi exploration game too early. Because again, like, and I guess that's the dismissal of it, right? Is that you just sort of boil it down to the very surface level interpretation of what the game is. So like people who play Star Control 2 and then play Mass Effect probably would feel like the two games are vastly different from one another.
Yeah,
but,
okay.
Like,
I guess if I was to play Devil's Advocate, oh, well, we got Star Control 2 winning. I guess we can't put Super Metroid in. Sorry, Mitch. It's a game where you just explore around and talk, have alien interactions. Yeah, too similar. I'm so sorry. I'm just giving you a hard time and whatnot, but yeah.
Yeah, but that is a worrying concern, right? Because there is pressure to do new, interesting things. I mean, otherwise, you might as well just do the whole award show by yourself and just pick your favorite games. Because if you don't show the diversity, if you don't show the variety at any point, then it kind of, I feel like that just really does hurt the overall impression of the show and, the credibility as curators here, because you want people to be able to experience the vast different kinds of things. So there is, and I guess like the other thing about Snatcher 2 is maybe it gets a little bit of a bonus point because I'm like, well, I'm not going to get another chance to pick this kind of a game basically ever. I mean, sure, there's other visual novels that people will put forward, but it'll be hard pressed to pick them. I mean, maybe there's one in 2007 that can go up against Mass Effect, and then I'll just end up picking that, and it'll be like
literally got Police Knots next year, and it's got a certain amount of the Kojima terms in there too, right?
I've already gone through it. Its nomination counts have been decided.
Okay.
Yeah,
what
right
does
now.
that mean?
Police Knots is a game where it's another Kojima game where you play as an astronaut who's also a police officer.
Oh, okay. That's quite different from a game. So I think we should add it in. No.
Yeah, actually, I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on it. If you like it, Noah, maybe you should put it forward. And, I mean, I'll back you up if you do. I'm just sort of tied down with the games I gotta put forward. I don't have too much wiggle room. But if you want to go for it, then I can definitely give you like a point or two and push it over the edge for sure.
Well, and I guess I'll say my part. I don't necessarily mind if two of the same type of games win years back to back, because we're gonna see that with Dark Souls 2 and then Bloodborne the year after. Which
I mean, knowing Mitch, and knowing our group, I mean, I doubt this is gonna happen, but it might be we're gonna have this with Dark Souls 1 and 2 and 3 and Demon Souls and Bloodborne and Sekiro, because Mitch and to a certain extent us are all very both fans or at least appreciators of From Software's games by Miyazaki and stuff. But I don't know, we'll cross that bridge when we get there, I guess.
I'm gonna nominate everything I can for those games.
So, okay, it's not that it should never happen, but just that we gotta use that power. It can only happen
for Dark Souls, is what you're saying, right, Mitch?
Well, no, we have to use the power carefully. That's the point.
Yeah.
So, and like, as for the From Software ones, I don't want to say which ones, but I have it narrowed down which ones I think would actually be like, yeah, among its peers. Like, if it was just a From Software award show, I'm like, okay, well, like, these 2 or 3 or whatever would be in the running to actually win. Everything else, like, is good, but, I could very easily be swayed to go with something else. I mean, I'd probably like to see it nominated just because they're such masters of their craft. I mean, it's sort of like, The Godfather and The Godfather Part 2. The Oscars went for that back-to-back, and, I'm basically vocalizing the opinion that Cabaret should have won against The Godfather Part 1, just because The Godfather Part 2... Well, this is as just from the logic of my argument. Because Cabaret won, 7 of its 8 nominations? So the only thing it didn't win was Best Picture. And clearly the Academy was loving it. So I'm like, well, this obviously seems like your Best Picture winner, and instead they went for Godfather.
I haven't seen Cabaret, but Godfather seems amazing in pretty much every way. I'm surprised it didn't win more awards than the other stuff, but I guess Cabaret was just better.
The
for
funny
them.
thing about that is a lot of people were actually surprised, like, at the ceremony day that, like, Godfather wasn't winning. And so that was also, like, a weird, like, revelation for them. And you could see them kind of, like, try to make up for it with Godfather Part 2 on some level. Because the only thing Godfather won was Marlon Brando got Best Supporting Actor, and then it won Best Screenplay, or Adapted Screenplay, and then Best Picture. So it took 3. And what was it? Francis Ford Coppola lost Best Director to Cabaret, and like everything else it lost to Cabaret. So it's just kind of an interesting, and like, yeah, we talk about how Godfather's like, the greatest film ever or whatever. But if Cabaret had won Best Picture, we'd probably still be talking about Godfather, but we'd also be talking about Cabaret a little bit more too. And again, I having not seen it yet, but it's like I probably would have seen it had it won, because it would have popped up on my radar sooner, and then I would have gone back and investigated it more and maybe found something that was really, worthwhile. So it's just kind of, that's the logic of the argument. It's not necessarily whether it's good or bad or right or wrong, but it's just something to think about. And I mean, for the most part, I think we're doing really well. We only have 4 Best Pixel winners to go for right now, but they're all very different games currently. And, Mass Effect doesn't come out till 2007. So there's a lot of time in between that. But it will be, like, these things have basically started, like, these first 4 have kind of established, like, a number of key genres. So now going forward, it's like those genres will kind of be under scrutiny, and then ones that have not won are going to be elevated in my book. But not exclusively. Like, if it's just the best game, it's just the best game. And I do feel like the sentiment in the room was that Star Control 2 did deserve it. So, I concede the win. It was just, I'm just explaining, like, where I was coming from with it and why there was so much hesitation to go with Star Control.
Yeah, it still is crazy, though, to think that, like, if you just had... You say that, in retrospect, you would have just changed it from Dragon Quest V to Snatcher. If you had made that revelation on awards show day, Snatcher would have won over Star Control 2, and I would be mildly upset, so...
Yeah, so it's probably better that I didn't make that choice. The crazy thing is like, the people who voted for Snatcher didn't really argue for Snatcher. It was pretty much an argument for Star Control, and then I was like, I'm going Dragon Quest just for the reasons that I said, and that was pretty much the end of the story. And it was funny to calculate it up and be like, holy crap, Snatcher's doing really well. It's got 2 first choices, 2 second choices, and then or 3 second choices, and then a third. I'm like, that's better than some of the scores of games that actually won, like Secret of Mana for music or whatever. So it was a close call, but the votes are what they are, and Star Control 2 is our Best Pixel winner.
He says as he grits his teeth, mad.
It was still my 3rd choice, so it wasn't that low. It was just mid-tier. It's a mid-tier win. And
mid-tier
I got
win,
to
SMH.
And I got to make up for it with Best Pixel 1983, which went to Myst by almost a complete landslide. We only had 1 detractor, he who shall not be named.
Now I'll name myself Doom! Justice for Doom!
The one time I didn't for Doom.
Nah, I mean, Myst is a respectable win, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, I can't complain that much because, like, Myst was definitely, like, it wasn't working that much for me, but it clearly works well for a lot of people. And the ways it's working for a lot of other people is in a way that is artistic, and that is kind of what we're trying to recognize at the Game Awards. So, I'm glad in some ways that it won, because, I mean, Doom I was more putting in just because I wasn't huge on Myst, but, like, Doom, but, like, Doom's not the most artistic game ever, so, I mean, it wouldn't have been, my proudest achievement for the Game Awards or anything like that, not like Star Control 2 or anything like that, so, yeah.
Yeah,
remember,
for sure.
It's your fault it didn't get a perfect win for 1993, just remember that.
This is
I guess
true.
that was one advantage of last year having fewer voters, is there were probably a lot more votes where we actually got the perfect clean sweep with, like, Castlevania 4s or things like that, where we got unanimous wins and stuff. Probably won't get that too often going forward for the award ceremonies.
Yeah, I've decided to revise that rule for the Onyx, because it's supposed to get a bonus point if it gets all the votes, first choices. But that's basically going to be impossible for future games at some point, I think. I mean, if it happens, then, like, maybe. But I think it's a more fair reason to give it a point if it wins in 1 round. So if it gets 4, if it gets 50% of the votes plus 1 in one round, then I think that definitely counts for something, because it's like, okay, yeah, you didn't have to compare points, you didn't have to reallocate votes, you didn't have to do anything else. I could just write it in, and then I was like, okay, everybody clearly wants this, or enough people do, so the others don't have enough support. So I think that's going to be a fair way to give the Onyx a little bit more of a push here and there, but...
Yeah, sure.
Talking about the Onyx Award, the most important award, the game that you should play no matter what before you die. Who won that?
That was Doom. So yeah, we had a discrepancy here, which was cool. So
sorry, who won that?
Doom.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah, so the Onyx is kind of like, and this is, so yeah, question for you guys. You take all the best Pixel 1992 games and all the 93 games, and you put them together in a list of 10. What's your number one pick there?
Doom.
You wouldn't stick with Myst?
No. Well, I see, that's why I like trying to differentiate
with the Onyx.
The Onyx Award, because I feel like Onyx Award should be for the best overall video game, while the best pixel should look more at it being an art form.
Yes, which is what it's for, yes.
Exactly, so I like where it's at now.
You stewing on that thought, Corbett?
Oh, I don't know, I just don't have that much... Wait, what was the question again, exactly?
So the question is, you got 10 Best Pixel nominees, and it's all 5 from 92 and all 5 from 93. Which one would you go for number 1?
Star Control 2, no question.
Okay. Gotcha. And then would you deviate into, like, Doom at that point in Myst, or would you stick with 92 for a while?
Oh, you mean for my number 2 pick after Star Control 2?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd probably pick Doom after that, and then, yeah, probably Myst after that. Probably my number 3 pick. So yeah, I mean, it's up there. I mean, I definitely respect the ambition and stuff that it was trying to do. And, you know, it clearly worked for a lot of other people and stuff like that. And like you mentioned, it did make a big impact on the games industry. One that I didn't fully appreciate until I had done a bit more research and found out that, like, you know, the people who came into video games for Myst actually stuck around for the sequels and stuff, which is, you know, pretty amazing and stuff. So, yeah. I don't know. It's got some sauce.
One of the kind of advantages, too, of going with Star Control 2 is that the Star Control 2 is a very different game from Myst, whereas, like, Snatcher and Myst are kind of similar. I mean, they are very different, but that's just because Myst is a weird beast, not because, you know, Snatcher is doing anything, you know, totally off the walls. But, you know, they're both, like, point and click and pretty bare bones in terms of, like, how you play them. So if, like, Snatcher had won 92, you know, Doom's stance for 93 gets a little bit more weight, I think, just because you're getting a different kind of experience. But yeah, I think I would have been much less happy with Snatcher Doom versus Star Control and Myst, because I feel like Snatcher doesn't really get at the root of some really interesting, like, philosophical and even, like, game medium ideas to question that Myst introduces. So yeah, Myst is, like, a very interesting Best Pixel win, I think, because it's going to be a game that, yeah, it's not necessarily the most fun that you're going to have, but you're not going to regret playing it by and large. I think you're at least going to be intrigued by what it talked about and the kind of conversations it rose. And that one, I think, represented the category really, really well, probably more so than any of the nominees, like, or even the winners of past seasons. Like, Myst is, like, the first game where I'm like, yeah, this set a really strong standard for what the Best Pixel is supposed to do, because it's like that Best Picture category where it sort of reflects back on us and makes us ask questions and have interesting conversations about, you know, a number of different important topics, and Myst totally does that. It's sort of like the like Spotlight, even though that movie's, like, really terrible and just super boring. It does, like, promote really interesting questions. It just doesn't have any questions to say about the medium of filmmaking, which is why I thought it was a bad Best Picture win. But, like, it was asking, like, culturally relevant questions. So you can kind of see where the logic was of, like, well, let's go with this movie because it's something interesting to, like, reflect back and have us talk about. And, yeah, Mist just does that really well, I think. And it's rare. It's rare to get a game to do that, I think. I think it's harder to come by.
Dude, I'm so glad that actually Mist and Doom tied.
Yeah, that was crazy in technical artistry. I'm really glad for that too, because, man, we debated those two categories to death. That was crazy. Like, there was so many strong, compelling arguments for both. So I'm really happy that it ended up in that result, because in a lot of cases, if you're arguing that much, like with best direction, like someone will eventually bend and then something wins. And even though the other one had, a perfectly strong and capable argument, but technical artistry was one where like it just kind of happened that we split in such a way as to back each other up exactly.
Well, you say that, but then we argued for an hour and a half of Best Pixel 93, and we saw what happened there.
Yeah, we argued definitely the longest for 93 Best Pixel, I think. That was very intensive. I was extremely tired after that conversation. And the funny thing,
lost.
Yeah, I know, right? I mean, it's almost kind of funny because it didn't matter that much. I could have argued a little bit, and you could have gone Mist second, and that would have been enough to win for sure. But like, I didn't know that about the other voters, because we had done I'm talking about the pre-debate, before we had the larger group. And then when we had the larger group, I kind of was recapping the arguments, and it was funny because you missed that one, but Corbett was bringing in arguments in favor of Doom for Best Pixel 93, but he was trying to bring the game out of, he was trying to make it play in the same ballpark that I had made the conversation about, which was, what is its artistic merit? What does it say about the human condition? All this other stuff. So when he tried to do that, it was arguments like, well, it kind of helped like bro culture, and there is like satisfaction in going around killing demons, and pleasurable satisfaction is an important thing too. So
well, hey, it was more than that. Hang on a second. I specifically mentioned that it managed to pair the nihilistic, teenage, optimism or teenage sentiment of the time. Pairing it with power fantasy actually helped all those people feel like both heard and empowered, which was important because they could easily just sink into depression and stuff like that. So yes. I thought that for that reason, it has a bit of artistic merit. And that's part of the reason why I think that emotionally, Doom hits better for me and Noah than it does for a game like Mario. Like the whole like saving a princess with like bright fancy colors, that doesn't really hit as well. And because there's that underlying sentiment of like, it's me against the world, but I actually have some ability to affect change in a way and whatnot, But again, C- for artistic merit. It barely it barely gets in there. I'm not saying it's amazing, but I think that it barely gets in there.
Well, see, actually, Doom is trying to talk about fighting your inner demons.
It's just like this nightmarish psychological state. The thing with those interpretations is, especially like the last one that you're mentioning, Noah, is that, we're laughing because it's a projection. It's something we project into the game and not necessarily something that the game specifically promotes or is, interested to cultivate itself. So that's where like that deviation occurs, because Myst really wants you to project, but it does, I think, a decent enough job of cutting off certain avenues and be like, well, we're not really talking about this. But yeah, that other abstract thought you have, that will definitely apply. There's a lot of different things you could throw at it that it can handle. When you bring up like a C- point in its favor towards this category, this is where we had, such extensive conversation about how much does each aspect of the category matter in terms of its, stance for this particular win. And for me, it's like that human condition. Like, if you have that, you've basically won my vote at that point, and I'm going to be going to bat for you. Unless, like, there's multiple games that also meet that criteria equally well, or, there's some other
Star Control 2! Sorry, continue.
Yeah, I mean, well, I'd say I don't know that Star Control, Snatcher, or Dragon Quest really comment on the human condition like better or worse than each other. I think they're all kind of like B territory.
Wrong. Sorry.
I mean, it just didn't feel to me as much. Like, I liked the writing of it. I thought it was fine, but it's not a I don't know. There's a real maturity in Mists that I think matters in a medium that's so immature, especially at this particular stage. And I don't mean immature as in like pathetic. I just mean immature as in like very, very new and currently appealing to younger audiences. And so therefore, like Dragon Quest V, I think comments on the human condition just fine. But it is like a game about kids. And similar boat with like Illusion of Gaia. Like, you know, at some point, the greatest novels are not about kids. Yeah, you have a Huckleberry Finn, but that's not like all of them. And so I just want to see that range come out. And not that like Star Control 2, you know, that obviously wasn't about kids either. I think it was about something worthwhile, but it was very like niche, nerdy, sci-fi, geek culture kind of interests, you know?
Yeah, but the thing is that you're writing off Star Control 2 because it didn't appeal to you. But in terms of tangible, not arguable things it says about the human condition, it's so much more than Snatcher or Dragon Quest V. I'm sorry. Like, I could write so many different things it says about the human condition. So I don't know if the rule of the human condition works quite as perfectly as you think. I mean, maybe it's just that, I mean, do things, I guess, with your human condition vote, as far as if you have that, then you're backing it, like, does it have to say it in a way that resonates with you specifically or appeals to you? Or, like, how would you qualify that statement, I guess, if you are going to qualify it?
Well, there's two things there. One is that it's a lot harder for me to argue for it if it doesn't appeal to me, because then I just don't get it, right? And so then I'm sort of hoping someone else will and that they can argue for it. And that kind of leads me to the second point, which is that when we talked about Star Control 2, we talked about it in a number of different categories. Direction was the most useful compass for kind of getting at some of these important interests. But like when it came to Best Pixel 1992, we didn't really discuss it that much. And I would say like in the future, when we did that episode, the recording, because I gave you that window, I was like, are you going to tell me like more about its Best Pixel nomination? And you sort of just gave me the brief overview, and then you're like, oh, I'll talk about it more on debate day. I don't think we should do that next time, because that left me in this really ambiguous space with Star Control 2 throughout the whole ceremony, because I never had a foundational like argument for why it was trying to win. I just knew that you liked it for the most part, and I knew that Noah was in that camp too, but like that's not enough for me. So it would be useful if like you had kind of presented like, oh, okay, well, like here's like this comment on the human condition in a real succinct way right up front in that, you know, early camp. Because I mean, remember, your pathway to presenting Star Control 2 was kind of riddled with a bunch of different things that were puzzling to me throughout. So you had like that one, and then it was only going to be up for like 2 categories or 3, something like that to start with. And I was like, that's way too low. If this is your big game, it needs more. And so I was then arguing for it in other categories just based on my impression of it, and kind of helped pushed it into a few more. So it was an interesting kind of like, and then in other cases, it was just by how our discussion of the categories went. But, you know, I don't know. Do you kind of get what I'm saying with that? So I sort of felt like I was out in no man's land when it came to like the deep psychological, artistic comment on humanity stuff from Star Control 2. Like that didn't really seem like the reason people were going for it and talking it up. Same with like Doom. Like nobody was talking about how it commented on the human condition until I asked you to, and then it got a C-.
Yeah, well, I mean, for Doom, so I mean, again, I only have a limited amount of time to be making my pitches. I had figured that with Doom, it would have been enough for it to just be an outstanding game, and that's still enough to potentially win Best Pixel and whatnot. But because you later clarified that human condition is, at least for you, very essential, now I had to double back and be like, okay, well, even if Doom is not good enough to earn a nomination for commenting on the human condition, I have to now explain why it's at least not that bad for the human condition. Like, if that was not,
that's
like,
fair.
So that's why I didn't mention that.
To be clear, too, like, you're not wrong in that is enough for Doom to win. It's just it wasn't enough because Myst was there. That was where I was kind of like, because like if it has to always comment on the human condition, like what if Myst was from 1992 and Contra was from 93? You know, it's a no-brainer. Like, I'm going with Doom. The others aren't commenting on the human condition in a better... I mean, maybe Gabriel Knight, but that one was also kind of like laced with some problems, and it was kind of ineffective in some ways. So, you know, you kind of measure against that, and it's like, well, it didn't really comment on the human condition well. So that's the only other one we have. Same with Illusion of Gaia. Like, yeah, it does talk about it, but it doesn't really know what it wants to say, and it's hard to decipher that because the translation's so bad. And, Mega Man X is pretty surface level message at the end of the day. It's there, but it's not great. So yeah, like at that point, then I'm more than happy to go with like a Doom win. It definitely earned its reputation. It's super fun. It's got great standing among the other, categories here. But because Myst was there, I was like, you got one that's really hitting the human condition level super hard. So now it just feels like this massive disparity between the two.
Yeah, and at least regarding Star Control 2, the best pixel thing, well, for starters, I mentioned it before, but like the way that you were giving me the, pitch, it was not clear that you specifically needed me to talk about best pixel. It just made it, because you were just asking like, oh, well,
yeah.
What do you think about the ranking of Star Control 2 relative to the other people? And it's like, for me, I didn't want to give spoilers, so I was being very coy at that point. But it's all
yeah,
also
I definitely didn't ask the question well, for sure, which I'll try to be better about too.
I also thought that I did.
Yeah.
It was already a freaking long video with Star Control 2. I was trying to keep it short, but like I did present like 5 points in favor of Star Control 2's narrative, which I thought were some of the top points about it. But there's so many more beyond that. It's just that I did present some things on why it was commenting well on the human condition. And I did talk forever about how good the direction was and how it specifically channeled the discovery and the narrative really well together. So the thing is, at the end of the day, I felt like I made all of my strongest points for Star Control 2 for Best Pixel during my individual categories. So like, while I potentially would still go back and maybe recap some of that or emphasize some of that in the Best Pixel breakdown, it also was not as necessary as it was for something like Myst, where a lot of Myst's Best Pixel things were not things that you properly could cover during the individual categories. So you had to really dump a lot extra on there. Whereas with Star Control 2, in some ways, I can just refer you back to the earlier ones in the interest of trying to not make it even longer than it already was. At least that was my thinking at the time.
Well, that may have actually made a lot of sense because, remembering that Myst only had 3 nominations, so, our talking space was severely limited. And Tom and I actually talked extensively about it. It was like a 50-something minute episode, even though we only had 3 categories. But there was so much to talk about with the game, and even when we had finished, there was like still other thoughts that were coming to mind. It was like this never-ending conversation. So it ended up coming out way better than we anticipated. But that's like, I gotta remember too, that's like a unique circumstance that happened to Myst in particular. So yeah, I don't think you did anything necessarily wrong with the way that you conveyed it. I think it's just kind of a learning opportunity for the both of us, because like, I like a really solid message with my Best Pixel winners. I like that core message to come through nice and clean. So like, you got Loom, and it's like the message in that is super easy. This is an easy game. Anyone can play it because it's short. It has a cute art style. All you do is sort of, learn music, and then you play that to solve puzzles. You're just there to experience the story. So when you boil down what Loom is doing, the message to the lay person who doesn't know anything about video games is, oh wow, video games can be stories. Oh wow, video games don't have to be the grind that everyone seems to be obsessed over. They can actually just tell a nice little story and let you escape for a while. And that was like the reason that I leaned on, which I don't think was really strong for you for Loom, was it? Because for me, it was just like, as a game experience, that was like a great entry point kind of game.
Per your recommendation, I give relevance to other Best Pixel winners I think 1 point in my overall scoring system, but not very much. For me, I'm much more about standalone, regardless of the other Best Pixel nominees. How artistic and excellent is this experience? And Loom was very artistic, very excellent, and very innovative in pushing the envelope on how it's being artistic and excellent and stuff, with literal inventing of dithering, inventing of not dying in a video game, conveying it through a manual and an audio log. There's just so much really cool artistic stuff going on there, and it still worked out reasonably well most of the time. So yeah, that was more core to my reason for Loom for Best Pixel.
Which is funny, because some of those reasons actually were negatives in my book. I don't like that it was trying to use the manual, because to me, it was like, well, you're a video game, so you're a digital interface. Do everything through that. Stop relying on other media, other forms of art to convey your message. So that was kind of a detractor. But then it sort of became a plus at some point, because I sort of recognized, well, this is part of gaming history when they used to do this much more, commonly. Even just in the era, like the Super Nintendo, you would get an instruction booklet if you got a new Super Nintendo game. So it wasn't something exclusive to PC or adventure games at all. It was something that was just very core for the time. So I could get behind that. But you see how it's like a very different reason than what you're like, oh, that's such a cool novel thing. And I'm like, that's bad for the medium. But then I'm like, well, it's part of history, so that's a good enough excuse. So it's kind of like this interesting weighted reasoning.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the most unique thing in the world that in terms of it's like and probably a lot of this is filtered just from my experience of Mass Effect, just because I'm like, it was so hard to like just play the game and just accept it as something different. I was like, it's like so similar. The best parts in our conversation was when you would bring up something that was more old school, like, oh, if you lose, or if you take too long, the enemy aliens come and they take over the galaxy, and then it's just over and you have to replay the whole game.
Actually,
I thought that was awesome.
I forgot to mention, by the way, I have so many things to talk about that I don't get to mention about it, but like when the enemies take over, there's a point where the game is unwinnable, and you can go to the enemy alien race who's invading the galaxy, and you have several different tactics to try to persuade them not to do it. All futile. They just let you sit there and beg for your lives, beg for you to stop, and it won't work. You just have to sit there in existential horror and watch every race slowly disappear from the map. Yeah, it's a freaking great game.
That's what I want to see, because that's something that isn't there just for entertainment value, because that's something you do specifically because it's uplifting the game world's intent, as opposed to just like how I'm going to feel about it. Like, yeah, it sucks that I have to spend another 20 or 30 hours playing the whole game again, but I don't want it to pamper me. You don't go to experience an art form just to be pampered. That's not how it works. So there's like a real integrity to that choice,
Oh yeah, actually, it's even better than that, by the way, because the conquering alien race, I forgot to mention, is different from the conquering alien race you think was bad at the very beginning of the game. And the one who's conquering is the one you can't reason with. And the one you thought was bad at the very beginning of the game, you go to them, and they say, oh my gosh, young one, flee for your life. You have no remaining hope left in this galaxy. You need to get the frick out of here. And it's just like, holy crap, what is this game? This is so weird.
Huh.
But
yeah, that's really cool. Yeah, this is like helping. I guess too, it was like Thousand Cuts argument, which I don't like Thousand Cuts arguments very much. I like, you are a visual novel in the best way possible. It's like, okay, that's a strong argument, because not really going to go for visual novels very often, if ever. So now I have a chance to do that. I'm going to be tempted on that offer. How is the game? And then I can start looking at the nuances, but there's already some initial persuasion,
That might be it then, because like I do think that there are some elevator points for Star Control 2, which in my opinion are still stronger than the other ones. But I would say that where it really outshines the other ones is the depth and the quote unquote Thousand Cuts argument, where in terms of just the sheer amount of commentary on the Huey edition and the amount of cool gameplay narrative synergies, it's just so many of them, and I can't talk about them in a 1 hour thing. And to some extent, that's part of the limitations of our awards show ceremony in whatnot, is the fact that like we're trying to make these arguments in the span of 1 hour, but sometimes game experiences are way larger than that, so you can't really get, and that's why you hope that everyone plays the game, but I get that not everyone has unlimited time, so it's more than you can really expect. So I think our Game Award ceremony is good. That just might be one of the slight hindrances of it, I suppose. But I will keep that in mind, though, as far as specifically how it comments on the Human Condition, or just in general, a few strong arguments is better than like many less super strong arguments. And I guess also for you want something that's easily digestible, so I'll have to pay more attention to the best pixel summary at the end, because at the end of the day I do think that the points in favor of direction and narrative and the fact that it's good at lots of things, those are all strong, but like
they are
because you really need to have a single elevator pitch of what it does the best. I'll try and put more emphasis on how re-summarizing that in a way that emphasizes its best points, I suppose. Even if it means repeating myself. I mean, it's probably still going to be relatively brief at the summary, so it wouldn't be the end of the world to repeat myself for at least a little bit more than I did. Because it was I had like a 3 or 4 sentence like summary at the very end, which was very small, considering that was the thing I was pushing for best pixel, I suppose. So yeah, maybe I'll try and refine my summarizing for next year and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the game. You may be more or less necessary depending on what it is. I think that's why I asked specifically about the comparison, though, because knowing the comparison of like, well, why would we go with Star Control over these other two games, which have a very clearly defined reason to be there? I sort of like didn't quite get that answer resolved. But, you know, I don't necessarily need to have that answer resolved, for one. But also, if there's not enough time in the way that we currently run things, you can always chat with me about it, nerd out about the game, and kind of explain why I think it's a good
Well, I mean, I
contender for
could, but I
this.
mean, the three of us did have our pre-debate day where we stayed up till 2 a.m. So I think what you're telling me is we should have stayed up till 5 a.m. That was clearly the mistake that we made.
I think we
right?
should have just had another sit down. You could also do it
I don't know.
earlier in advance, like when we're just picking nominees, which is good too, because then we kind of weed through some of the less strong arguments.
Perhaps.
We've kind of been rambling a bit. Do you want to weigh in on any of that, Noah, before we calculate everybody's points, their final scores?
Who won Best Onyx? No, I think overall, like, I think the way this season went pretty well. I mean, I don't think there was that many, like, surprising things, which I think is good, because if it's too surprising, then I feel like sometimes it just, some wins are kind of feel off. Like, I felt like that was, you know, obviously for Best Music Track. Like, it just felt off. Like, obviously it's deserved, but it feels off because it's surprising. Like, that's not what anyone was expecting.
Yeah.
So, I think overall this was fairly straightforward of the season, but... So.
I think those will be famous last words, because I think for people watching, there will be lots of surprises. Like, I think people will be very surprised to see Shinobi outbeat Doom in level design. I think the obvious answer there is Doom. I think people will be a little bit surprised to see Mist do well, if I had to guess, just because its nomination count is so low. So it does seem like, oh, why is it even here? I mean, like, if we were really going to honor it, it would have been all over the place, and then it makes it obvious, so that's kind of a sleeper surprise. And then, you're right, Music Track was definitely a big surprise. I think Snatcher pulling ahead in sound is also going to be surprising, just because there was, I don't know, just some compelling choices elsewhere, especially with Doom. I think that's what people will expect. I think people will expect to see Doom.
And I guess I'm saying more that it's not as surprising because, you know, I was there for the debate phase. Yeah, so for us, it wasn't...
Yeah. That's fair. Like, there's just that disparity, because us as debaters, we're like, we know what's in the conversation to win, but like everybody else maybe less so, unless it has a ton of nominations. So, okay, so let's just go down the list and count up how well we did.
Okay, so Mitch is number 1 with 11 picks. So out of how many categories again? Let's see here. We've got 16. A total of... Yeah, so 11 out of 16. That's a pretty good score, Mitch. Not bad.
Yeah.
Then next up is Noah with 10 points. So that's also a very respectable showing. 10 out of 16 overall. And then me in third place, I have 7 points, which I am still happy with, personally.
Well, good, because it was close. I think, actually, Corbett, you were on bottom tier, if I'm not mistaken. Like, when I tallied up everyone else, I think you're at the very bottom, I'm afraid.
Yep, okay, well, I'm glad everyone else got to have a great time at my expense. No, I'm just kidding. That being said, though, I mean, at least that helps even the score somewhat between us, considering that, like, last pretty much mopping up every category to a certain extent. So, yeah, I feel like, even aside from the fact that I am perfectly, you know, fine with the wins that I got, like, I also feel like, at the very least, you know, it deserved to be a bit more in the opposite direction, considering last year and stuff.
Yeah, I think last year there was only, I think it was like 5 categories where my vote actually helped dictate the winner, and the rest it was just like, nope, didn't matter. It was gonna win regardless of what you did. I was like, geez. Oh, man. Alright, well, I think this has been enough of a, hopefully, enlightening perspective to hear all our thoughts behind the ballot. Hope you enjoyed it. Let us know in the comments what you thought of the season, if there were any surprises for you. It'd be nice to kind of hear more from, you know, all the viewers, just because, you know, we get so ingrained and we know what we're vying for to actually win, and so that becomes our talking points, but no idea how the rest of the community feels about it.
And also, keep in mind with all of our voting things that, you know, we are just a subjective group of humans and stuff like that. So we're all probably going to be wrong from time to time. So, if you want to launch a thing in our comments about how, oh, it should have been this because this and this, that's perfectly acceptable as long as it's all, done in constructive debate format and whatnot. But yeah, just don't take it too personally if we, disagree with you on our votes and stuff.
We're never going to hear the end of Kyle's theme. I think.
You're never going to hear the end of it. I can sit over here free of that guilt. Thank you very much.
I didn't vote it down that hard. And it's not like I voted in number 1 for the thing that won. So, like, I don't know what happened. I don't know what to tell you. Yeah, I'm also curious about the whole Doom versus Mist. I feel like people who know Mist will probably be understanding that Mist makes sense to win. But I feel like people on the outside are just going to be like, what? Why didn't Doom win? So this might be an interesting
At the end of the day,
deviation.
The real purpose, we can feel very happy at the end of the day if our Game Awards show can resurrect the decades-old feud between Doom and Mist. We really just need to get another good flame war going between those two fan groups. So, yeah.
Yeah, let's just fan those flames. Unfortunately, we couldn't have a tie between the two of those, so here we are.
Mm-hmm.
Well, any closing thoughts from you guys, or should I call it there?
For the last time.
Not really. I had a lot of fun this year for the awards ceremony, so thank you guys for playing with us. And what was that you said, Noah?
I said for the last time and hopefully forever. Who won Best Onyx? That's what I thought. All right.
Yep. All right, and with that, I will see you guys next time. Stay tuned, actually. I think we're going to try to do one more conversation talking about all the snubs, so that'll be more focused on everything that we thought should have been nominated or should have won, and we can kind of hash it out in a separate video just because this one got enormously long. Obviously, we do very long conversations, but that's what you're here for, I assume. So thank you all for watching, and we'll see you next time.